Hi, I'm Beck and welcome to my deliciously spoiler-filled video about Oathbringer by Brandon Sanderson. These are the best bits, the best moments, the best quotes that I noted down while I was doing my reread. So without further ado, let's get into discussing this fantastic book. I of course had to start this list on a Dalinar moment, one of his flashbacks, where he's in the midst of a war, he's being the Blackthorn, and he says, "Who in damnation shot that? That has to be almost 300 yards." It's when he got shot with a shard bow, and he's scoping out who must have shot him, and he manages to track him down, run towards him and find him, and he goes, "Welcome to my elites." And the assassin is like, "What? I tried to kill you." And Dalinar's like, "Yes, from a distance," which shows remarkably good judgment, and it just made me cackle. But from cackling it goes to, you know, emotion and tears, because we've got Kaladin, and it's the moment when he meets his new younger brother, and it says, "Kaladin, meet your brother." Kaladin trembled and held the child against him. He couldn't stop the tears. My heart. Interestingly, when Adolin was holding onto Renarin's hand when he was being healed, he says a pulse of light washed through Adolin and he instantly saw himself perfected, a version of himself that was somehow complete and whole. His wrist had been completely healed. I have no idea about Renarin's ability, but I just love Adolin so much as a character. So seeing him observe that version of himself, it's almost like it was showing this is what you could be versus this is what you are now. And he always wants to be a good person and do the best he possibly can. And given that he killed Sadeas, being a good person has such a mixed message, and so it was so interesting for me to reread that scene and just observe Adolin. I just love Adolin, so it was nice to read more about him in general. And then of course it wouldn't be a best moments video without Adolin going to see Shallan and then Patton calling out "no mating," because that's like an iconic quote of the series, right? But then there's a little bit of world building, and odium is of discussion, and the Stormfather says to Dalinar to pick a champion and lose. It would only cost him time. So a contest of two champions, it would only buy time for Rosha. Then Dalinar found Oathbringer, the sword, and he said, "Could we save this Spren who made this blade?" as he's talking to Stormfather, and the Stormfather says, "I know of no way. It is dead as the man who broke its oath to kill it." But just because Stormfather doesn't know doesn't mean that it cannot be done, because there's a lot going on that is new to Rosha. The Radiants are untrained, but they're showing very different, unique things, like in Renarin's case with bonding a void Spren. So just because the Stormfather doesn't know doesn't mean that it's impossible to fix a Spren. I just have so much hope again for Adolin and his Deadeye Spren Maya. That's really where I want this conversation to come to fruition. Like Adolin, I just want him to be a Knight Radiant. He already technically is in spirit, but I just want him to have cool powers. Then we have got a much hated character in Moash, and I've written the note of Moash and how he's striking out on his own with like a small ragtag group, and how they were ambushed by the Fused, and it says the Fused tried to lash him, but he grabbed onto her, thinking of Kaladin and relying on his Bridge 4 training. And I noted down at the time that as much as I hate and despise Moash, looking at him reminisce and use the training that he learned in Bridge 4, it made me sad as well, because he's got so much pain, but he's using it towards a villainous gain rather than the way Kaladin is using his pain and becoming as heroic as possible to protect people that he loves. Also, every time I read through these books, I get progressively more and more worried about Shallan, especially because she said to herself she could be a scholar, she'd be the best little ward ever. It's like that's how she set out in book 1. That was who Shallan wanted to be, and now she's making a persona for it, or thinking about making a persona. So she is rapidly spiraling, and it is a concern. There was a small moment where the Stormfather roasted Dalinar, and it said Dalinar was trying to open a door in the war camps, and without thinking he put a hand to the side to summon his shard blade. Nothing happened, and the Stormfather is like, "What are you doing?" And Dalinar's like, "Sorry, habit." And that made me laugh. Then going back into Dalinar's lore, he was having a conversation with Odium in, the present day, but Odium made reference to his past that Dalinar doesn't remember. And Odium's talking about passion and living without it. And he says, "Ask that of cultivation next time you see her. Ask what she'd want for Rosha. I think you'd find me the better choice." And Dalinar's like, "Next time? I've never seen her before." Odium is like, "Of course you have. She simply robbed you of that memory. Her touch is not how I would have helped you. It stole a part of you away and left you like a blind man that can't remember that he once had sight." Every little tidbit of insight and world building we get is like a little crumb, and it always piques my interest so high. And then Lift really sums up Odium. When he walks away from Dalinar in Dalinar's vision, Lift is infiltrated the vision as well, and she's like, "That guy is creepy." This moment actually gave me chills. It's when Dalinar is reflecting on his journey, and he's got the past of a tyrant, but he's suing for peace right now. He's trying to unite all of Alethkar, and nobody's listening to his words words, they're only relying on his actions. And then after the duel with Queen Fen's son, Dalinar is stabbed through the chest and he heals, and he's then sitting next to an old broken building. And because Dalinar is a bondsmith, he can hear the stones whispering, "Unite me." It said he was hearing the spren of the temple itself because the stone is used to being one thing. It's used to being the temple, but now it's been broken. So it's like, can you bond me back together, basically? And then it says, light filtered through the cracks in the stones and knit them back together. Glory spren burst around Dalinar's head. No, the man he'd been 20 years ago would never have done this. The power was good for far, far more than breaking. We'd been ignoring that, ignoring answers right in front of our eyes. His character growth every time gives me so many chills, and I just adore it so much. And now I don't know how many people actually like Alokar, but I personally really do. Like, I quite respect him. And when he said this thing, I felt quite heartbroken. When a small group go to Kholinar in disguise, he says this to Kaladin. He says, when I fail this city, I want to make sure you are there to protect it, because he knows Kaladin is a hero and he doesn't see himself as a hero. And it's just such a fractured journey. Like, he's been scared his whole life. He hasn't known how to be a ruler. Dalinar has really taken over that mantle, whether he means to or not. And so Alokar's just been sidelined this whole time and not taken seriously. So of course he wouldn't have any confidence in himself. And when he says that to Kaladin, it just breaks me so much. But then we circle back to Shallan and Patton, and in Kholinar, they're observing the strange spren, and Patton is like, does that not hurt? He buzzes. Shallan says, of course it does. She stabs herself in the thigh to see a pain spren manifest. But this self-harm for distraction is not healthy. She's putting her ideas and her research ahead of her well-being, and it seems like she's shirking her well-being more and more to progress for a tactile outcome rather than to make herself better. And at the idea of sharing about Vale and telling them that she's got more than one persona, it says she'd been dreading this and kind of anticipating it. I need to tell them, she whispered. Patton said, it's good progress. So he's like, stop with the lies to yourself. Start to level up, please. Share what's going on in your head. Heal yourself. And she's going the other way. I love the flashbacks with Evie as well. She had this beautiful insight Dalinar seems to appreciate in retrospect but didn't appreciate at the time. And she's talking about war and battle to Dalinar, and she says, I hate what this does to you. I see beauty in you, Dalinar Kholin. I see a great man struggling against a terrible one. And sometimes you get this look in your eyes, a horrible, terrifying nothingness, like you've become a creature with no heart. I do not wish to see you kill. Do not feed it. So Evie was like, I know that this is odium and the thrill is him, and you giving into the thrill is you giving into his influence. Like, stop going on a massacre, maybe. But he plows ahead anyway. And it's only now in hindsight when he's looking back and going, you don't unite people by breaking. The man in the past could never have done this thing. So he's grown so much, and with his memories returning, it breaks my heart, but it also builds me up as well. Like, I love reading about his journey. To evidence the fact that Dalinar is not human or not himself, it says after the ambush, a rock slide, Dalinar was surviving it and then dragging Oathbringer behind him in the ground, which just that mental image is insane to me. Evie looked at him horrified, and Dalinar saw his reflection. The man who looked back seemed more Voidbringer than man, face crusted over with black blood, hair matted, blue eyes wide, jaw clenched. Punish him, Dalinar said, the thrill rising again. We will make a pyre of this city. But Evie didn't want this for Dalinar. She didn't want this to be his legacy, so she went and pled for mercy, and while she was pleading for mercy, Dalinar burned the city with her in it, so he technically killed her. So with him giving into hate, he killed the one thing that was loving in his life, which is just heartbreaking as well. This book is so heartbreaking. Sanderson, why did you do this to us? I also like that Wit appears every now and then. He appeared very much as like almost a mentor and a therapist to Shallan when he says it's okay to live on. Your other minds take over because they look so much more appealing. You'll never control them until you accept being you. Wit says it's all right to hurt, and seeing Shallan actually listen to her and recognize her struggle is probably what she needs. Like, Adolin does see it and recognize that something is going on, but he doesn't know how to help, and my heart also breaks for him because he's just trying his best, but he's not professionally trained. He doesn't know what to do. And then speaking of Adolin, it is the battle before the fight for the Oathgate in Kholinar, and Adolin is talking to his sword and he says, thank you for assisting me all these years, and if it helps, I'm going to use you to do something good today. I'll try to always use you that way. So that's kind of his version of an oath, I guess. Then during the Battle of Kholinar, there is of course the scene. I don't know if this death affected other people the way it affected me. Like, Alokar is not a super beloved character, but just to see his potential, like Kaladin saw how he was about to say the ideal to become a Radiant, and then he gets cut down in the midst of it. So Alokar is on his knees among the battle. In one arm he held his son, in the other he held a sheet of paper, and that was Shallan's drawing of him as a better man. Kaladin could almost hear Alokar muttering the words. The hair on Kaladin's neck rose. Alokar started to glow softly. Lowering his spear, Moash rammed a Lokar through the chest. I will never forgive him. And if he gets any kind of redemption arc, I hope he dies very soon after, because he's never going to be a character that I empathize with. Yes, before he did make me sad, but that was at the very beginning of his villainous arc, and it was when he was talking about Bridge 4, and that has a soft place in my heart. So Moash, no exceptions. Whenever I reread this, I just don't really care about Szeth, but we got some story of him and the Skybreakers who have been still going strong, even though they're not necessarily an Order of the Knights Radiant that is reliable. They just kind of sit outside everything, and for the most part they support Odium anyway, but Szeth is like, I'm supporting the Radiants. But in his training though, Szeth is learning to be a Skybreaker, say the oaths, and practice his abilities with everybody. Szeth has the talking sword as well, and he's like, he could not be happy. It was only a tool of retribution, not redemption. And he has the talking sword, and it says, you think like Vasha, the sword said in his head. Do you know Vasha? He teaches swords to people now, which is funny because Vasha isn't any good with a sword. So that's a nice little Warbreaker reference there. Every time the sword or Vasha is mentioned, I get a little spike of, oh, what's going to happen there? But then we get further into the world building, and it's a discussion between Dalinar and Yasna, and Yasna is breaking the news to Dalinar that the history of Roshar isn't how everyone assumed it was. He's like, that writer wasn't human. No, uncle, that writer was a Dawnsinger, one of the original inhabitants of Roshar. The Parshman named us Voidbringers, Dalinar. I have suspected this for a time. The first desolation was the invasion of humankind onto Roshar. We came here and seized this land from the Parshman after we accidentally used surge binding to destroy our previous world. That is the truth that destroyed the Radiants. And then Dalinar directs his thoughts to Stormfather, and he says, it's true, isn't it? We're not the defenders of our homeland, we're the invaders. I honestly thought that this revelation would rock the Radiants that we know of in this world at the moment more than it has, but maybe it's a slow burning ripple effect that is going to occur a bit later. But then we are inching towards the end of the book, and we've got one of my favorite moments of Dalinar's, and it says, unite them. Glorious spren streamed around Dalinar, thousands of golden spheres, more spren than he'd seen in one place. This is in his standoff against Odium in person, at the battle where they're just about to take Erithru. They swirled around him in a column of golden light. Beyond it, Odium stumbled back. Dalinar thrust his left hand to the side, plunging it between realms, holding the very fabric of existence. Like, how epic is that line? The world of minds, the world of thought. He thrust his right hand to the other side, touching something vast, something that wasn't a place. It was all places in one. He'd seen this before in a moment when Odium had let him glimpse the spiritual realm. Today, he held it in his hand. It gives me chills just reading it back again. Dalinar says, I am unity. He slammed his hands together and combined 3 realms into one. We are fully into the Sanderlanche now because it flicks to Kaladin, and he says, Bridge 4, Kaladin whispered, out of Stormlight as Amaram swings his sword down. An arrow slammed into Amaram's head from behind, going right through the skull, coming out of its inhuman mouth. He turned about just in time to catch another arrow straight in the chest, right through the flickering gemstone heart. Amaram dropped in a crumbled wreck beside Kaladin. A glowing figure stood on some rubble beyond, holding Amaram's enormous shard bow. The weapon seemed to match rock, tall and brilliant, a beacon in the darkness. It almost brings me to tears to read that again out loud because it is such a pinnacle moment and I adore it with all my heart. Then Teravangian, who really doesn't do it for me, but I get that he's part of the intense political plot and on Odium's side. And it says Teravangian and Odium when they're discussing together the diagram that Teravangian has based his whole life and plot on. And he says somebody had to make the difficult decisions. He slipped off his golden seat as Odium studied another portion of the diagram. There, behind where the bed had stood, a section of words that had faded from golden to black. What was that? So the golden words were all of Odium's predictions layered on top of each other, but the black is something outside of his awareness. As he drew near, Teravangian saw that the words were blacked out into eternity, starting from this point on his wall. As if something had happened there, a ripple in what Odium could see. At its root, a name. Renarin Colin. And then finally the reveal that I thought was going to be bigger, but it's a pinnacle moment for Adolin, one of my favourite characters. And it's when he's talking to Dalinar at the end after the whole Sanderlanche has happened. And it said, I killed Sadeas' father, it was me. I broke the codes of war and killed him in the corridor. For speaking against our family, for betraying us time and time again. I stopped him because I knew it needed to be done, and I knew you'd never be able to do it. I'm not going to be king, father. Didn't you listen to what I just said? I broke the codes. So that is such an important character moment for Adolin. He said to Maya, his sword, that he wanted to do good, and he's also killed Sadeas, who is a man of betrayal and not a good person at all. So in his mind, he's done the right thing. And to Dalinar, he's like, I don't necessarily approve, but also Sadeas was not a great person, so meh, and I would tend to agree with that assessment. But those are all of the moments in Oathbringer that I wanted to share with you. Let me know if you share these moments, if there are any other smaller things or bigger things even that I've missed. I would love to talk to you about Oathbringer in the comments, but thank you so much for watching this video. I'll come chat to you below and I'll see you in my next video. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed, and thank you again for watching. Bye.